I'm sorry to do this, but this is a very Spock quote. You know, the needs of the many far outweigh the needs of the one or the few.
And I think that's the price we have to pay for democracy.
There's just so many different ways that you can try and achieve social change.
An active takes all kinds of different forms.
To inspire them, you sort of lead by example.
I became involved in various protests because there were things that I was interested in seeing happen or things that were happening that I didn't want to see happening. Various kinds of protests began to seem like a good way to try and accomplish what we wanted to accomplish.
It's different for everybody and it's personal for everybody. So social activism to me is when you see an injustice that's social.
Hopefully it's helping people find their common ground and want to strive for something better. Again, strive for that fair and just society.
People can't change that by just sitting around and hoping for things to get better. Historically, the only advancements, the only mitigations of those inequalities have come from people from oppressed and marginalized groups banding together around their common interests and fighting for social change, fighting for a betterment in their lives and conditions.
There really is power in numbers. Benefits, protections in the workplace, like all these things came about because people organized.
A very good friend of mine who danced for the Oakland Ballet for a very long time said the best way to support the arts is to buy a ticket. Well, the best way to, believe in social activism is buy a t-shirt, show up, stand up, say something. So it doesn't matter what your version of social activism is as long as your voice is in there.
If you can touch one life or make one person think, I think you're doing something.
Talk to people who you know, family members, friends, people in your community, your workplace, your colleagues. Talk to them about what you're doing. And generally activism is a community, it's a community activity of people with common interests in the same workplace or area coming together to do something that helps everybody out.
We all need to understand and explore and appreciate and realize the values within us.
A very well-timed comment is sometimes all you need. I can't think of the last time that I was listening to somebody who was yelling at me. I don't listen. I just know that they're yelling. That's all. So I think that goes back to the idea of the peaceful protest. If somebody's yelling at you, you're not listening. They're not getting their point across. You're not getting your point across. When was the last time you came home and said, if only I could see what you're saying? Instead we say, if only you could see what I'm saying.
I guess people who don't agree with it will be like, oh, look at all the protesters, why are they yelling and trying to get, why aren't they going through the nice ways of making social change? Why aren't they writing their congressmen and all this stuff?
And they find the idea of activism and going out and protesting to be abhorrent and silly and destructive and useless. But sometimes you can't force your politics into other people. You have to, just live and let live.
But at some point you just kind of shake off the negative stuff.
Everyone's got something to be angry about. Everyone has a reason to get out there and be politically active. But at the same time, public speaking, organizing people, it can be very difficult, and everyone should be politically active in my opinion, but when you're going out there for the first time and getting active, it's very easy to make mistakes.
We're exposed to cultures, we're exposed to different religions, we're exposed to different ways of, different families.
It's very easy for a protest to turn ugly, for there to be, insults and, disputes, maybe even physical pushing back and forth between protesters. I've never actually, gotten in a fight with someone in a protest, but I've gotten to the point of, being yelled at, and I shouldn't have, but yelling back at people.
My first protest was when I was 9. And because the protest was not peaceful, they threw a 9-year-old in jail along with a couple of other people. So for me, social activism is saying something, but picking your battles.
Protesting usually involves an awful lot of work, an awful lot of commitment. Sometimes it involves sacrifices on the part of the individuals, the groups who are protesting. So I don't think people take it very lightly, generally speaking.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't peaceful protests too. you know, and both sides have to behave appropriately. This is the land of the free, supposedly. The First Amendment does guarantee us the right to free speech, but it doesn't guarantee me the right to hit you, and it doesn't guarantee me the right to spit in your face. So both sides have to be trained in peaceful protests, and I think that's a big part of the problem, is that nobody is actually training peaceful protesting.
I think that women have been playing today, I would say, play a leading role, maybe more so than men, in leading social struggles. So I think women have a lot more reason to be angry about the way that society is right now, and a lot more reason to get out there and be politically active. And I don't know if it is true that women network better than men. Maybe it is. And men, we need to get out there and be more active too.
Women who are advocates for like different issues that don't involve gender, and they're coming at it from their individual experiences. And I know men who are collective about their experiences.
There's gender differences in communication. So for instance, a woman who overshares because she's trying to process something that's going on in her life. A male who overshares has been taught through the system of education that he gets rewarded for that. You know, good dog, sit, stay.
There's this saying that if you educate a boy, you educate an individual. If you educate a girl, you educate a community.
I think the female voice, the more we use it, the more effective it is. And I think that the more women are getting educated, the more we're realizing that.
Even just having your friends post kind of what's going on in their communities and what's going on at their schools, or just what they see in the news is important.
The ability to communicate is greatly facilitated and sped up, the cost is lowered, and it can still get people mobilized.
I've heard this rumor, I don't know if it's like a conspiracy theory, that Facebook is controlled by the CIA.
Like, I always think about Oscar Grant. Like, here's a person who got, who was shot by police illegally, and, the cops in Oakland thought they could get away with it, and then they didn't know that someone had a video camera out, and then the people who taped it used the camera, put it on YouTube, and then, Facebook, whatever, social media just spread like a wildfire.
I think those have had an incredibly empowering effect on activism and on social change. They've allowed activists to link together across national borders, across communities, on an unprecedented scale. I mean, in the 60s, when people think was like the high times of activism, it would take weeks or months to send a letter around the world. Now it can take it can be almost instantaneous.
I can only sign so many electronic petitions. That's armchair activism, and that's effective to an extent, but I'm not sure what the reaction is at the other end. I'm not sure how the senators feel like, oh, well, 14,000 people clicked like on Facebook. That's not really a very strong statement. That's not really a very effective statement. So I think the effectiveness of social networking hasn't been tapped into yet.
It definitely has kind of an academic connotation to it, but personally, I think it should mean, or does mean, movements towards a better society, a more fair, a more just, a more equal society.
My personal experiences with politics, including protests, certainly influences the way I understand history and relate to history and make sense of history. Therefore, certainly it influences the way that I try and communicate those understandings to students, try to help students understand history, make their own sense of history.
Well, I teach college. I teach social psychology. I've taught this, and basically the idea of protesting is once again reduced to the idea of voice. If you're saying, no, that's not okay, you're not agreeing with what's being said. You're saying no. And that's the idea of protest. That's literally the definition of protest. I protest. I say no.
I really want to teach because I think that people in the world we don't know enough about the history of oppressed peoples fighting against colonialism and imperialism, the history of working people and slaves fighting against oppression, and social injustice. My interest in changing the world and being politically active for a better society and future is entirely the inspiration for everything that I do career-wise and personally.
I think that one of the most important aspects of all of this is to stay communicating. You know, communicate, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it.
I don't expect to change the world, just my little corner of it.
There's just so many different ways that you can try and achieve social change.
You just have to believe that your voice is just as important as somebody else's.
Study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.